Please, he's just a little boy. The woman's voice echoed across Dock 12, but nobody stepped forward. In a galaxy that negotiated with money, kidnapping a child had become just another business transaction. That was the mistake that would haunt every pirate captain for the rest of their lives. Noah Carter was 9 years old, skinny for his age, with messy brown hair that never stayed flat no matter how hard his mother tried every morning. He wore a faded blue hoodie over a Terran Academy t-shirt, carried a backpack covered in hand-drawn space stickers, and clutched a half-finished chocolate chip cookie that his dad had promised he could finish after they reached their shuttle. To anyone watching, the Carter family looked ordinary. Daniel Carter checked cargo manifests for the Terran Trade Authority. His wife, Melissa, restored environmental systems on aging stations that most people never noticed unless they stopped working. They were the kind of hard-working American family that saved for vacations years in advance, packed homemade sandwiches instead of buying overpriced station food, and argued about whose turn it was to pick the next movie on Friday night. Meridian Exchange Station bustled with thousands of travelers from every corner of known space. Alien merchants shouted over one another. Freight drones floated overhead carrying massive shipping containers. Children laughed while chasing holographic animals across polished steel floors. Noah loved every second of it. "Dad, look," he called, pointing toward an aquarium wall where glowing creatures drifted through blue water. "Do you think Earth will ever have fish like that?" Daniel smiled without looking up from his scanner. "Buddy, Earth already has enough things trying to bite us." Noah laughed. "Yeah, but those are prettier." Melissa slipped her hand into Noah's. "Stay close, sweetheart. This place is bigger than it looks." "I know, Mom." He rolled his eyes the way only a 9-year-old could. "I'm not a baby." Daniel finally tucked away his scanner. "Okay, team. Shuttle leaves in 15 minutes. Ice cream after we board." Noah's eyes lit up. "Double scoop." "Nice try," Daniel said with a grin. "Single scoop." "Worth asking." The family laughed together. It was such an ordinary moment that nobody nearby remembered it until much later. The power flickered once. Most people ignored it. Then every public display froze for exactly 3 seconds before restarting. Security drones briefly hovered in place. A maintenance alarm chirped somewhere beyond the cargo docks. Daniel frowned. "That's odd." Melissa noticed it too. Probably another software update. Noah had already wandered a few feet toward a display of miniature exploration ships. "Can we get one?" "Maybe for your birthday," Melissa answered. The answer disappointed him, but only for a second. Behind them, for cargo workers rolled a magnetic freight container across the concourse. Their uniforms looked authentic. Their badges scanned as legitimate. Nobody questioned them. One of the workers quietly spoke into his collar. "Target confirmed." Another replied, "No resistance expected. Human civilians always cooperate." The container stopped beside the family. A side panel opened with a soft hiss. Daniel turned just as 2 figures stepped forward. "Sir," one of them said politely, "station security needs a quick identity verification." Daniel instinctively placed himself between the strangers and his wife. There must be some mistake. The smiling figure nodded once. "There is." His smile disappeared. "The mistake is that you thought anyone would protect a human child this far from Earth." Noah tightened his grip on his backpack as every sound in the station suddenly seemed to disappear. Daniel Carter did not think. He moved. "Noah, behind me," he shouted as he reached for his son, but the strangers were already 2 steps ahead. Melissa grabbed Noah's shoulder with both hands, refusing to let go. "You are not taking my son," she cried. Travelers stopped walking. A dozen people stared. Nobody moved. The 4 disguised kidnappers did not raise weapons. They did not yell. They simply surrounded the family with the quiet confidence of people who had done this before. One of them held up a small device that projected a station security badge. "Stand aside," he said calmly. "This is an authorized custody transfer." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That badge is fake." The alien tilted his head. "It only needs to look real for 10 seconds. Before Daniel could react, every information screen across Dock 12 flashed with a maintenance warning. Lights dimmed again. The station speakers announced a temporary communications outage. The timing was too perfect to be an accident. Melissa held Noah tighter. She could feel his heart racing against her arm. "Mom," Noah whispered. "What is happening?" She forced herself to smile, even though tears had already formed in her eyes. "Everything is going to be okay, sweetheart." She wanted to believe it as much as she wanted him to. Daniel looked around desperately. A security officer stood less than 50 feet away, frozen, staring at a handheld scanner that suddenly displayed a jurisdiction warning. The officer hesitated for only a moment, then slowly backed away. Whatever authority these strangers claimed to have was apparently enough to make station security disappear. One elderly merchant quietly turned his cart around and walked in the opposite direction. Families pulled their children closer. Conversations stopped. Fear spread faster than any alarm ever could. The leader stepped closer to Daniel. You have two choices. Cooperate, or make this memory harder for your son. Daniel swallowed every angry word trying to escape his throat. He had spent his entire career solving problems through procedures, paperwork, and calm conversations. None of those skills mattered anymore. Noah looked up at his father. Dad. Daniel met his son's eyes. He forced his own breathing to slow. Buddy, remember what we practiced? Noah nodded almost automatically. Stay calm. Look around. Remember everything. That is right. Daniel smiled, although it nearly broke him to do it. You have a great memory. Better than mine. Noah took one slow breath. Then another. He looked at the kidnappers one by one. One had a cracked silver wrist plate. Another limped slightly on his left leg. A third smelled faintly of machine oil. He quietly counted them inside his head. For people. One cargo container. One shuttle entrance 20 yards away. The leader noticed the boy watching everything. Interesting child, he muttered. Melissa stepped forward again. Please. He is only 9 years old. Exactly. The alien answered without emotion. 9-year-olds have families who pay. A small transport shuttle detached from the cargo bay without attracting attention. Its registration numbers had already been erased from every public database. The kidnappers guided Noah toward it while Daniel and Melissa were held back by station personnel who finally arrived, only to insist they wait while identities were verified. Daniel stared in disbelief. You are checking paperwork while my son is being taken? The officer lowered his eyes. I have orders. Minutes later, the shuttle vanished into traffic, blending among thousands of departing vessels. Across Meridian Exchange Station, life slowly returned to normal. Stores reopened. Announcements resumed. Travelers hurried toward connecting gates as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But somewhere beyond the crowded shipping lanes, a frightened little boy sat alone inside an unfamiliar ship, clutching his backpack with both hands, silently repeating every face, every voice, every detail, because his father had once told him that sometimes the smallest details were the ones that brought people home. Noah Carter stopped crying about 10 minutes after the shuttle left the station. Not because he was brave, but because something inside him quietly decided that crying would not help him see better. The ship was cold in a way that did not feel like temperature, more like intention. Metal walls, soft white lighting, no windows. A place built to move things, not people. He sat on a narrow bench with his backpack on his lap, fingers still gripping the strap so tightly his knuckles hurt. Across from him, one of the kidnappers watched him without blinking. Kid is calm, the man said into his wrist communicator. Too calm. Another voice answered after a short pause. Do not underestimate Earth children. The first man replied, almost annoyed. They adapt. Noah pretended not to hear them. Instead, he focused on small things like his dad taught him. Count exits even if there is only one. Listen for patterns. Remember voices. The shuttle vibrated slightly as it aligned with a larger vessel. Noah felt the change in engine tone more than he heard it. A deep, steady hum replaced the lighter station noise. Where are we going? He asked suddenly. The nearest kidnapper glanced at him. Somewhere safe, he answered. Safe for who? Noah asked without thinking. That question made the man pause for half a second longer than necessary. For everyone involved, he finally said. The shuttle docked with a soft mechanical impact. Airlocks connected. Locks sealed. The kidnappers stood up at once. Time to move, their leader said. Noah rose slowly, still holding his backpack. As they walked him through the narrow corridor, he noticed something strange. The ship was too clean for pirates. Too organized. Signs were labeled in multiple languages. Emergency routes were clearly marked. Even the guards moved with discipline that did not match criminals. That was when Noah started to understand this was not just a random kidnapping. Meanwhile, far away on Earth, Daniel Carter stood inside a small secured office at Meridian Exchange Station, fists pressed against a metal table. Melissa sat beside him, staring at a blank wall where a screen used to show station feeds. It had gone dark 2 hours ago. They are stalling us, Daniel said quietly. His voice was controlled, but his hands were shaking. They keep asking for authorization codes that do not exist. Melissa did not answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Why would anyone take him? Daniel looked at her. Because they think we will pay. We will, she said instantly. Daniel shook his head. Not fast enough. A uniformed liaison entered the room. He looked uncomfortable even standing there. We are still tracing the vessel. Traffic control says it merged into a civilian convoy corridor. It is gone from active tracking. Melissa stood up, so quickly her chair scraped the floor. Gone? What do you mean gone? The man avoided her eyes. It means whoever planned this knew exactly how to disappear inside regulated space lanes. Daniel exhaled slowly, forcing himself to think like an engineer again. Systems, not emotions. Patterns, not panic. This was not random, he said. The liaison nodded once. We are beginning to believe that as well. Back aboard the unknown vessel, Noah was led into a wider chamber. It looked like a meeting room disguised as cargo space. There were tables, data terminals, even seating arranged like a briefing hall. The leader of the kidnappers stood near the center, speaking to several other figures appearing through holographic links. We have the asset, he said. Family has not responded yet. One of the holographic figures leaned forward. They will. Noah watched quietly from the edge of the room. He noticed something else now. Nobody here looked excited. They looked careful, like people who had already made a mistake and were trying not to make it worse. For the first time, one of them looked directly at him. Do you know why you are here? The man asked. Noah thought for a moment. Because you think my parents will pay you. Silence followed. The man studied him longer than expected. And will they? Noah shrugged slightly. My dad always says problems get solved faster when people stop guessing. That answer made one of the kidnappers laugh once. But it was not a confident laugh. It was uncertain. Somewhere deep in the ship, a system alert chimed softly. No one reacted at first. Then another alert followed. And another. The leader turned his head slightly toward the corridor. What was that? He asked. No one answered immediately. Noah sat back down slowly, still holding his backpack. Watching the adults who had taken him begin to look for answers they suddenly did not seem sure they had. The first system alert sounded like nothing important. Just another soft chime in the background of a ship that was never meant to carry children. Then a second alert followed, sharper, more insistent. Then a third, cutting through the silence like a change in whether you could feel in your bones before you understood it. The kidnapper nearest the console frowned. Run that again, he said. His fingers moved quickly across the interface. The screen responded slower than it should have. Not frozen. Not broken. Just reluctant. Internal diagnostics are fine, another man reported. No sign of breach. The leader did not look convinced. Then why am I hearing alarms? Noah stayed seated. He hugged his backpack tighter, watching every movement. Nobody had told him to stand. Nobody had told him to sit. So he stayed still and observed. That was safer. That was always safer. In the corridor beyond the briefing room, lights shifted color for half a second. Not enough for most of the crew to notice, but enough to make one technician pause mid-step. Did you see that? He asked. See what? The corridor lighting just changed routing. The reply came instantly. That is impossible. This is a sealed civilian vessel. But the technician did not move. Something about the way the air felt had changed. Like the ship had started paying attention to them. Back in the main room, the leader opened a private channel. We are experiencing a systems delay. Confirm command authorization is still active. A pause followed. Then a voice answered through encrypted comms. Authorization is valid. Proceed. The leader exhaled slowly. Then stabilized the ship. He closed the channel. We are overreacting. One of the others looked uncertain. Overreacting does not trigger 3 consecutive internal warnings. The leader pointed at him. We are professionals, not superstition-driven miners. This is a human freighter, not a warship. Noah tilted his head slightly when he heard that. Something about the way they said human made them sound like they were trying to convince themselves. Another alarm chimed. This one was different. Softer. Almost polite. It displayed on a side terminal instead of the main console. System route change detected. The technician leaned in. That is not us. The leader's expression finally shifted. Explain. I cannot. The system is rerouting itself through secondary architecture. Secondary architecture? The leader repeated. This is a cargo vessel. The technician swallowed. Not anymore. Far away, on Earth, Daniel Carter stood in a secured operations room staring at a tactical map that refused to resolve properly. Melissa was beside him, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Neither of them had slept. Still nothing? She asked. Daniel shook his head. We are not blind. We are being filtered. By who? That is the wrong question, he said quietly. The right question is why someone would go to this much effort for a 9-year-old child. A second officer stepped in. We intercepted a fragment of signal interference near the convoy corridor. It is structured, not random. Daniel turned immediately. Structured how? The officer hesitated. Like something is mapping us. Back aboard the vessel, no one noticed something new. The adults were no longer speaking confidently. Their voices had changed. Shorter sentences. More checking. Less certainty. He had seen adults like that before. Usually right before something went wrong. One of the kidnappers finally looked directly at him again. Kid, he said, did you touch anything on this ship? Noah shook his head quickly. No. Did you see anyone else near you in the shuttle? Noah thought for a moment. Only the people who brought me here. That answer should have ended the conversation. Instead, the man looked more worried. That is not possible, he muttered. The leader turned sharply. What did you say? I said the system is acting like something else is inside it. Silence followed. Noah watched all of it carefully. He did not fully understand what was happening, but he understood one thing clearly. The people who brought him here were no longer fully in control of where he was. And somewhere, deep inside the ship, something was starting to move without asking permission. The ship changed again, but this time nobody on board pretended it was normal. The soft hum of the engines remained steady, yet everything around it felt slightly misaligned, like a conversation where someone had started speaking in a language no one else admitted to hearing. One of the kidnappers stood at the main console, fingers hovering without touching anything. I am getting access logs I did not request, he said quietly. From where? The leader asked immediately. That is the problem. They are not coming from a port or subsystem. They are coming from the ship itself. Noah sat perfectly still, watching them argue. He had learned something important already. Adults only raised their voices when they were no longer sure they were in control. Shut it down, the leader ordered. Isolate the core systems. The technician hesitated. If I isolate the core, we lose navigation. Do it anyway. The lights dimmed for half a second, then came back slightly warmer, almost like the ship had adjusted to their decision instead of obeying it. That was when the second technician spoke up. We did not isolate anything. The system rejected the command. The leader turned sharply. Rejected? Yes. It is not responding like a locked system. It is responding like something that can choose. A long silence followed. Somewhere deeper in the vessel, a panel clicked softly without human input. Noah noticed the reaction first in the faces, not the machines. Fear was not loud. It was quiet, slow, and unmistakable when it finally arrived. The leader walked over to Noah, crouching slightly to meet his eye level. What is your name? He asked. Noah, the boy answered. Noah, the man repeated carefully. Do you understand what is happening on this ship? Noah shook his head. No. The man studied him for a long moment, then straightened. Someone is interfering with our systems. And it started after we brought you on board. That made the room go silent in a different way. Not confusion this time. Calculation. On Earth, Daniel Carter was no longer sitting. He was pacing inside the secured operations center while analysts whispered over fragmented data streams. Melissa stood near the wall, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Say it clearly, Daniel demanded. Where's my son? The analyst hesitated. We have partial triangulation. The vessel is moving through civilian corridors, but its routing pattern is inconsistent. Inconsistent how? Melissa asked. The analyst swallowed. It is avoiding patrol zones it should not know about. Daniel stopped walking. So someone is guiding it. Or something, the analyst replied. Back aboard the vessel, Noah finally spoke again. Are you going to hurt me? The question was simple. It landed heavier than anything else in the room. The leader paused before answering. That depends on your parents. Noah nodded slowly, like he was accepting information instead of reacting to it. Then you should probably be careful, he said. One of the kidnappers scoffed. Careful? Kid, you are not in a position to. The ship interrupted him. Not with sound. Not with alarms. With silence. Every system display flickered at once, then stabilized, then displayed a single line across every screen in the vessel. Route confirmed. No alteration permitted. The leader stepped back instinctively. Who issued that command? The technician looked at him with a pale expression. Not us. Noah looked at the glowing text, then back at them. Maybe it is listening, he said softly. Nobody laughed this time. The message on every screen did not disappear. It stayed there, steady and calm, as if the ship had decided to stop arguing with the people inside it. One of the kidnappers stepped back from the console. That is not a system response, he said quietly. That is a directive. The leader turned sharply. From who? From something that has full access to navigation, propulsion, and internal routing. The technician's voice lowered. That means it is above us. Noah watched their faces change again. Confusion was gone now. It was something heavier. Something closer to uncertainty about whether they were supposed to still be in the room. We need to regain manual control, the leader said. He moved toward a sealed maintenance panel and pulled it open. Inside were redundant override systems, old mechanical switches, backup controls designed for emergencies. He pressed one firmly. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, harder. Still nothing. This is impossible, he muttered. This is a standard cargo vessel. The technician answered without looking up. It was. I think it stopped being one the moment we brought him on board. Everyone in the room turned slightly toward Noah without meaning to. Noah noticed. He tightened his grip on his backpack again, but his voice stayed steady. I did not do anything. We know. The leader said quickly, almost too quickly. Back on Earth, Daniel Carter stood in front of a large tactical display where routes across civilian space lanes were flickering in and out like broken signals. Melissa was speaking to someone on a secured channel, her voice tight. You are telling me you cannot track a single vessel through a regulated corridor? She asked. A response came back. We can track it. We just cannot predict it. Daniel stepped closer. Explain that. The analyst hesitated. It is avoiding interception windows before they open. That should not be possible unless it has access to predictive traffic algorithms. So it is using station-level intelligence, Daniel said. The analyst shook his head. Not station-level. Fleet-level. Melissa turned away from the screen. That is not a pirate ship, she said quietly. That is something else. Daniel did not answer immediately. He stared at the map as if waiting for it to admit it was lying. No, he finally said. That is still our kid in there. Back aboard the vessel, another system alert triggered, but this time it was different. It did not sound like a warning. It sounded like confirmation. The words appeared again across every console. Intercept paths disabled. Safe corridor established. The leader slammed his hand against the console. Stop displaying that. The screen did not react. Instead, a new line appeared underneath it. COM is required for transit. The technician stepped back. It is responding like it is protecting the route. The leader turned slowly. Protecting from what? Nobody answered. Noah finally spoke again, quietly. I think it is trying to take me home. That statement froze the room more effectively than any alarm. One of the kidnappers laughed once, but it came out wrong. Nervous. Fragile. Ships do not decide things, he said. Noah looked at him. This one is. The lights in the corridor outside dimmed and then stabilized again, as if the vessel had adjusted its mood. For the first time, the kidnappers stopped treating the situation like a job and started treating it like something they were trapped inside with. The ship stopped feeling like it was drifting. That was the first thing Noah noticed. There was no announcement, no change in speed that anyone could point to, but something in the way the walls vibrated had shifted. It felt intentional now, like the vessel had chosen a direction and was no longer asking permission. In the control room, the kidnappers were no longer speaking in full sentences. Navigation is locked, one of them said. Then override it, the leader snapped. We already tried, the technician replied. His hands hovered over the console without touching it. It is not refusing commands. It is ignoring them. That distinction made the room go quiet. Noah stood slowly from the bench. No one told him to sit anymore. No one seemed sure they still had authority to give instructions. He walked a few steps closer to the edge of the room. Where are we going now? He asked. The leader did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower. Somewhere we did not choose. Far away, deep inside the vessel, a maintenance hatch opened on its own. No one was standing there. No one touched it. It simply opened as if the ship had decided it needed air in that section of itself. On Earth, Daniel Carter leaned over a live tactical feed with red lines stretching across space, lanes that no longer matched real-time movement. Melissa stood behind him, silent now, watching every update flicker and disappear. They are not following normal routes, an analyst said. Daniel did not look away from the screen. Stop calling it normal, he said. Nothing about this is normal anymore. The analyst swallowed. We have confirmation of vessel behavior that matches adaptive avoidance patterns. Melissa stepped forward. Say that in English. The analyst hesitated. It is moving like it knows where interception points will be before they exist. Silence filled the room. Daniel slowly straightened. That means someone built a predictive system into civilian architecture, he said. No, the analyst replied quietly. It means someone built a system that is reacting faster than prediction. Back aboard the vessel, Noah returned to his seat, but now he was no longer watching the kidnappers. He was watching the ship. The lights above him shifted again, subtly dimming and brightening in a slow rhythm that almost felt like breathing. One of the kidnappers finally spoke, breaking the silence. We are not alone on this ship, he said. The leader turned sharply. There is no one else on board. Then explain this, the technician said, pointing at the console. A new message had appeared. Not alone. Every system is connected. The leader stepped forward and stared at it. Delete that. The technician shook his head. It is not stored data. It is live response. Noah tilted his head slightly. Maybe it is listening better than we are. That sentence hit harder than anything technical. The leader turned toward him. What do you mean by that? Noah hesitated, then answered honestly. My dad says when something is broken, you stop shouting at it and start paying attention to how it reacts. A long pause followed. Somewhere in the ship, a distant structural panel clicked into place without human input. It sounded almost like agreement. The first real sign that something outside their understanding had taken control was not an explosion or a warning. It was silence. Every system on the ship paused for exactly one breath. Not human breath. Something slower. More deliberate. Then all at once, every corridor light shifted from white to a soft amber tone, as if the entire vessel had decided to lower its voice. In the control room, the kidnappers froze. That is not a protocol, the technician whispered. That is not even a command structure. The leader stepped forward slowly, staring at every console lighting up with the same message. Confirmed route active. Safe passage engaged. No hostile action permitted. He hit the console hard. Who authorized this? No answer came from the system. Instead, a different response appeared. Authorization not required. The leader stepped back slightly. That is not possible, he said. Noah was watching everything carefully now. Not afraid. Not calm either. Just focused in the way a child gets when something stops matching what they have been told the world should be. Maybe it is just doing what it was built for, Noah said quietly. One of the kidnappers turned toward him. And what do you think it was built for? Noah looked at the glowing screens. To take me home. That answer made the room colder than any warning alarm could have. On Earth, Daniel Carter stood in front of a tactical holographic map that no longer behaved like a map. It shifted slightly whenever analysts tried to lock onto it. Routes corrected themselves. Predictions collapsed into new predictions. Melissa was standing beside him, arms crossed tightly, eyes fixed on the moving data. It is adapting faster than we can model it, one analyst said. Daniel's voice was steady, but low. Stop calling it adapting. The analyst looked up. Sir, something is making decisions, Daniel said. That is not adaptation. Melissa leaned forward. Then what is it? Daniel stared at the flickering routes across space. Intention. A long silence followed. Back aboard the vessel, the kidnappers were no longer trying to override systems. They were trying to understand them. If this is external interference, the leader said carefully, then someone is guiding us. The technician shook his head. There is no external signal. Then explain the coordination, another man snapped. The technician pointed at the console. It is not coordination between ships. It is coordination inside this ship. That sentence made everyone stop. Noah stood slowly again. It feels like it is making choices, he said. The leader turned to him sharply. Ships do not make choices. Noah shrugged slightly. This one does not feel like a ship. At that exact moment, every terminal across the vessel displayed a new line. Destination locked. Priority override. Family return path. No one spoke for several seconds. Then one of the kidnappers whispered, almost to himself, "We did not program that." The leader stared at the screen. For the first time, his voice lost its certainty. "Then who did?" Noah looked at the glowing message for a long moment. "Maybe it knows who I am supposed to be with," he said quietly. And somewhere deep inside the vessel, something responded without sound, without command, without permission, simply continuing its path as if it had already decided that nothing else mattered anymore. The ship did not slow down. It did not speed up either. It simply continued forward as if the idea of resistance no longer applied to it. In the control room, every kidnapper's screen now showed the same destination marker locked in place. No one had entered it. No one had approved it. It was just there, steady and final, like a decision already made long before they arrived. The leader stepped back slowly, his voice lower than before. "We are not in control of this vessel." No one disagreed. Even the technician who had been fighting the systems since the beginning said nothing. He just stared at the console like it had stopped being a tool and started being a witness. Noah stood in the center of the room now, small compared to the adults around him, but no longer ignored. "I think it is done being afraid," he said quietly. The leader turned toward him. "What does that mean?" Noah hesitated. He did not have the words adults used, so he used the ones he had. "When I got taken," he said, "everything felt like it stopped caring what you wanted." He looked down at his backpack for a moment. "But this feels like something that does care." On Earth, Daniel Carter was no longer staring at moving maps. He was watching a single stabilized route line that refused to break no matter how many analysts tried to disrupt it. Melissa stood beside him, exhausted, eyes red but steady. "Is that a rescue trajectory?" she asked quietly. Daniel did not answer right away. He studied it like a man reading something that should not exist. "It is not a rescue route," he said finally. "It is a return path." "Back to us?" she asked. Daniel nodded slightly. "Back to what it recognizes as its origin." A junior officer stepped forward. "Sir, multiple alien tracking fleets are beginning to pull away from the corridor." Daniel turned toward him. "Why?" The officer hesitated. "Because they are not following it." "Not following what?" Melissa asked. The officer swallowed. "The vessel. They are avoiding it." Daniel exhaled slowly. So the hunters stopped hunting. Back aboard the ship, Noah had sat down again, but the atmosphere around him had changed completely. The kidnappers no longer spoke like professionals. They spoke like people trying to agree on whether they were awake. "If this reaches controlled space lanes," one of them said, "we are going to be intercepted." The leader shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "Anything that intercepts this is choosing to be part of it." That sentence made the room go still again. Noah looked up. "Are you going to let me go?" he asked. No one answered immediately, not because they were thinking of a plan, but because for the first time, the question no longer belonged to them. The leader finally spoke, voice quiet. "I do not think we are the ones deciding that anymore." The ship's lights softened again, almost like a sunset inside metal. The destination marker on every screen remained unchanged. Earth, not as a target, not as a threat, but as the only place the vessel was willing to acknowledge as home. And as the ship carried forward through the silence of space, something unspoken settled across every system on board, simple and absolute, as if the universe itself had quietly agreed on one thing. Some paths are not chosen. They are remembered.